Okay, well, thank you, Paul. Paul Bevan from Magic Family. No, from Magic Valley, I should say. Lovely to have you on the Future of Foods podcast. Could you just start off by telling us a little bit about Magic Valley?
Absolutely. Pleasure to chat today, Alex. So always love talking about Magic Valley. We're a cultivated meat startup based in Melbourne, Australia. And I guess for anyone that's not familiar with cultivated meat, it really is a ethical and sustainable solution for producing meat. So we start out by taking a skin sample from a living animal. We take those cells into the lab, turn them into stem cells, a particular type of stem cell that we use, which is called an induced pluripotent stem cell. And then from there, we're able to grow up basically the components of meat. So primarily muscle and fat. We combine those together to create a real meat product. So not a plant-based substitute, but a real meat product. So molecularly identical.
And you take the cells from a lamb called Lucy.
Yeah, so our first product that we developed was a lamb product. We would call it a mincemeat product here in Australia. Many listeners will know that as ground meat. And yes, so Lucy provided our first sample of cells as a lamb. She's now not a lamb, she's a full-grown sheep and living out her natural life with her flock in the paddock, which is great. And yes, she provided our first cell. So yes, we created a lamb product first. We've also produced a pork product earlier this year as well. So yeah, they're the two products we've produced so far. And aside from that, initial sample of cells, our process is actually completely animal origin free. So we don't use any animal products in the process at all. Some people or some listeners might be familiar with the term FBS or fetal bovine serum. We don't use that. We don't use any products of animal origin at all. So aside from those initial skin samples, that's the only involvement from the animal. And as we've just mentioned, the animal goes on continuing to live its normal, happy and healthy life.
Right. So yes, I'm glad you brought up the fetal bovine serum, because I noticed on your website that you don't use it, and that your growth media is completely meat free. So, I mean, that's or sort of animal free, I should say. I mean, clearly you can't sort of tell me what's in it for IP reasons, but would you say that your growth media is on a par with the effectiveness of the FBS? I mean, is it something that you're happy with, or are you still working on it?
Yeah, great question. So we're still refining the media that we use. I can't tell you exactly what's in it, as you mentioned, but they're all plant-based ingredients or synthetically derived ingredients, as opposed to using animal products. And for us, it was really an ethical choice in terms of developing a cultivated meat product that has the potential to eliminate, I guess, the slaughter of animals for that process. So it didn't make any sense for us to be continuing to include products of animal origin that would include or involve animal slaughter. So it was really an ethical decision for us. There was also a number of commercial reasons, I guess, really not to use FBS as well. There's a lot of batch variability and it's very expensive. So at scale, it really is impossible to use it. And so we've focused on that from the start, using some substitutes in terms of the plant-based ingredients and the synthetically derived ingredients in the media. We are very happy with where it's at. The effectiveness is very similar, and the cost is actually far less. And so we're continuing to drive down the cost and enhance the effectiveness in terms of having the cells multiply and expand, obviously, as quickly as possible, and to produce as much mass as possible. So that is a work in progress, and that will continue to improve over time. But yes, to answer your question, we're very happy with where it's at the moment, and we think that for any cultivated meat company to scale, they will need to do away with FBS if they're currently using it, and move across to a media that is containing no animal products. So hopefully the entire industry will go that way, but we think we've got a little bit of a head start because that's where we started.
So do you think it's producing an effective growth media is the kind of elixir, I suppose, you know, it's the thing that will determine success or failure in the future of the industry or of individual companies?
I think it's part of it. I think the bigger component to that is using the right technology. And when I say the right technology, I'm really talking about cell type and the type of stem cells that companies are using, because all companies are using, you know, vastly different technology. And so one of the main reasons that we use induced pluripotent stem cells is that the cells multiply more quickly and they produce more mass. They multiply indefinitely, and we can direct them to become any cell or tissue type in the body. Now, obviously, we view that as the best way to move forward, and that's the technology that we're using. And we're firmly of the belief that that is the only way to produce cultivated meat at scale. Obviously, there's other factors that come into it, like the growth media, like the type of bioreactor that you choose to use as well, whether you choose to scale out that technology or scale up in terms of size. So I think there's a number of components, but really, I think the key one is the cell type. And obviously, companies are using a whole lot of different cell types to get started with. So we'll see. We'll see what eventuates.
Okay. I mean, I suppose I want to avoid getting too sort of sciencey just because I'm not a scientist, but I would like to I don't know if you can explain a bit more about the cell type. You know, what's different about it? What's unique about these cells that you take?
So I guess for sure. So I guess the main difference between, say, an induced pluripotent stem cell that we use or an adult stem cell that a lot of companies use. So if you're using an adult stem cell, you might, for example, take a muscle biopsy, which is obviously a little bit more invasive than taking a skin scraping. Now, from that muscle biopsy, you'll have an adult stem cell that you can grow up into muscle. And that's one component of a meat product, the end product. You know, that muscle can't be turned into fat. You need to take a separate biopsy for fat to be able to do that. So again, that's, you know, more invasive for the animal. And those adult stem cells are limited biologically by what's called the Hayflick limit. So they've got around 50 doublings for those cells before they will basically die out and stop being able to multiply. And that's a biological limit. And so you'll see a number of companies trying to extend that lifespan of those adult stem cells, but that wouldn't occur naturally. And so some of those methods that are used to what's called immortalize those cells could be considered genetic modification, and some of them aren't. And so we think the consumer would have a problem with a genetically modified end product. And so the cell type that we're using is not genetically modified. And so that's another advantage, I guess, over using the adult stem cell. And so if you're able to immortalize those adult stem cells so they keep multiplying, you still have to take multiple biopsies for your muscle, for your fat, for the components that go into it. And you've got to grow those up separately, obviously. So they multiply slower and they don't produce as much mass. So obviously the longer the process, the more expensive it is as well in terms of a time frame. So again, in terms of scalability or commercialization, we view our technology as being much faster, much more efficient. So basically we can produce more end mass in a quicker time span for a cheaper price, which when we're talking about commercializing a food product, we think has many advantages, as well as being non-GMO, you know, not using FBS or any animal components, which we think will be important to the end consumer as well. Yeah. And being able to produce any cell or tissue type. So, you know, from that one sampling of skin cells, we can produce muscle, fat, bone, connective tissue, whatever we want to go into that final product. So we think they're the core differentiators between technologies, or at least adult stem cells and induced pluripotent stem cells.
Okay, well, as we're on the subject, you would have heard, one of the companies that have been approved in the US. They discussed how they got their initial cells from a chicken feather that had fallen from the chicken. What do you think about that? Is that possible? Is that a reality?
I do believe that's possible. Yeah, my understanding is that it is possible. I'm not sure how efficient that is, but my understanding is it's definitely possible to do. So I don't think there's any question around that. I guess some of the other approaches, particularly when we're talking about chicken and avian species, is the use of eggs as well, or embryos. And to us, like, we're not working on chicken at the moment, but for us, we think that there might be some potentially some ethical issues, I guess, around using embryos or eggs or embryonic stem cells, which is another option across all species. It's just in terms of the ethical considerations when it comes to the end consumer. But a feather would certainly be very non-invasive, and I think that's probably a good way to go. Not that we've tried it, but I definitely believe that it's definitely possible and a good approach. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so Paul, how did you first get involved in this industry? How long, where did it start for you?
Yeah, so probably seriously about 5 years ago, which is when I got really interested in particularly the cultivated meat space. My background, I think, as a lot of people will know, if you've viewed any of my social media channels, is that I've been vegan for nearly 10 years now. And so I was really interested, obviously in veganism and plant-based diets and lifestyle and the benefits of those. And so I was also very much interested in animal activism and how we treat animals in the animal agriculture industry and process. And so I was always interested in finding a way of minimizing harm to animals as much as possible. And a lot of that occurs, through our diet. So we use, animals in a lot of different ways, but, mostly through food. And so I knew as well that most people wanted to continue to eat meat. So we know today that, approximately, depending on which country, between 95 and 97% of the population eat animal products. And that number hasn't changed for many, many years. And so we know people want to continue to eat meat. As much as I or other people enjoy a plant-based lifestyle or plant-based products, the majority of people want to keep eating meat. And if I wanted to have an impact in that space, whether that be for animals or for the environment or sustainability or whatever the case may be, I knew to have any sort of impact that I needed to provide an alternative solution for people that wanted to eat meat. And so coming across the technology that is in existence and had previously really been used in life sciences and regenerative medicine to develop biological methods and tissue engineering from stem cells to be able to grow up tissue or cell types such as muscle, for example. Transferring that technology over to food products, I'd come across a few people working on that idea. And so once I came across that idea, it really made a lot of sense to me. If we could, create the same end products, so the same real meat products that consumers were familiar with and used to eating and wanted to continue eating, but we could do that in a much more, ethical and sustainable manner through cultivating meat. To me, that became the obvious solution to have the impact that I wanted to have. And so we know that there's so many benefits, to cultivated meat when compared to, I guess, traditional animal agriculture, whether it comes to land use, to water use, obviously the involvement of animals, but also the other benefits as well in terms of, being able to fortify the cultivated meat products because we're developing them in a sterile environment. and we have control over the inputs, we can add in additional, vitamins, minerals, good fats and those sorts of things. We can limit the amount of bad fats. And so overall, we can create, a healthier product. And as well, which is another key driver, I guess, for the end consumer, as well as taste, is price. And so we're very confident that we'll be able to compete on price or be even cheaper than traditionally farmed products. And so to me, again, if I was eating meat, if I had a choice between, a traditionally farmed product, at a certain price point, or a cultivated meat product that tasted exactly the same mouthfeel, the same flavors, it was also cheaper. It was better for animals. It was better for the environment. Then, why wouldn't you choose it? So to me, it would become the obvious choice for the consumer. And so, coming across that technology, we built the company up from there. Built a team of stem cell and bioprocess engineering experts to build a scalable solution, so we could, create cultivated meat products at scale. Because again, there was no point us, recreating what had been done, 10 years ago, where we could create, a burger in the lab for hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was no point doing that because that was not going to have any impact. And so our technology is a little bit newer. We've focused on commercialization from the start, as well as, a really ethical and mission-driven focus. But to have the impact, we know it's got to be commercially viable, which means obviously the taste and the price point primarily, and being able to produce it at scale. And so things have really just gone from there. So yeah, we've been operating the company for just over 3 years now. And as I mentioned, I produced the pork and lamb prototypes, and continue to build out towards commercialization.
It's interesting. I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about kind of giving somebody the choice between a cultivated meat burger, perhaps, and a slaughtered meat burger. And I have put this question to a number of people that I have met over the last few years. Ever since I became interested in this area, I've asked people, and I've been startled by the amount of people who have told me that they would rather eat the slaughtered meat burger. So clearly there is some sticking, some sticky points at kind of changing people's behavior. I mean, do you think that that's going to be a problem in Australia? Do you think it's going to that people are going to be okay kind of taking up cultivated meat over there?
It's a great question, and I think it probably varies very much by geography, and then potentially by age demographic as well. So we know that there's going to be, a certain percentage of people that will just never eat cultivated meat. They just won't be interested in it, and that's totally fine. And we know these people are just, never going to try the product. But we also know that there's a really large percentage of the population that lives in countries or areas or geographies that suffers very much from, food safety and security concerns and lack of access to protein. And they have a very different viewpoint from, countries where there is large animal agriculture industries or resources to be able to support that industry and have their own products grown in country. And so that's a very different equation to people in both of those countries. The other thing that we know is that particularly in the younger generations, they're obviously a lot more open to tech and change, but also tech in their food products as well. And so a lot of their purchase decisions are also influenced by the sustainability and ethics of those companies or of those products that they're buying. And so whether that's in Australia or whether that's elsewhere, I think those concepts hold true. And so particularly the younger generation, we think will be the early adopters of the products, who are just much more open to their influence or the influence they can have through their purchasing decisions, on ethics, on sustainability, on the health of the planet, and what that looks like moving forward. And so Australia is a really interesting country. I think we're second or third biggest meat eaters in the world per capita, and so we are we're definitely in an interesting country to be introducing cultivated meat. The general perception is here in Australia that we produce all of our own food, and we do export a lot of food as well, but we're also a net importer of many products as well, and pork being the example of one of those. And so not many people sort of realize that or understand that or know that here on the ground in Australia. But Australia does have a good reputation for food safety and security and quality, and we think that opens up potential for us as well into other markets for our cultivated meat products also.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good that you're looking at pork and lamb, because these are the products I think that I personally, as somebody who eats very little meat, but I do sometimes eat meat, and that meat is usually chicken, if anything. But pork and lamb are two meat types that I miss, because I used to really enjoy them, but I just don't eat them anymore. I just can't bring myself to do that. So it's so which one of those do you think is going to come to market first, or is it going to be both at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've contemplated that internally for quite a while now. At this stage, I think the lamb mince product will be the first product that we bring to market. There's a number of reasons for that, but without going into detail, we think it'll be the lamb mince product that we come to market with first. In Australia, we have a really good framework for the regulation of new food products or novel food products, which is what cultivated meat is considered here in Australia. Our regulator is Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, which obviously also covers New Zealand as well. And it's around a 12-month process from beginning to end. So once we submit our formal application, we'll get a result in 12 months from the time that we submit that application. And so we're looking to submit a formal application ideally by the end of this year, which would see us commercialising in Australia at least by the end of 2024, with a view to having products on shelves, that lamb mince product, by the end of 2024, start of 2025. And so that's what we're aiming at the moment with our first product here in Australia.
Okay. And in Australia, your regulatory process is made public, the kind of food regulator. So I noticed that Vox had put in an application, but it looked like it was going to take more than 12 months. So it looked like I was told kind of April. Anyway, yes, I can't remember the details, but I looked at it a while ago, but yes. So how, do you, obviously about Vox, but, are they kind of setting the standards, do you think? And then, once they've been approved, then you're going to know more about what's required through the regulatory process. Is that something you're watching closely?
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation. I think the regulators have been really fantastic to work with up until to this stage. They've been very consultative in terms of the process. As I mentioned, we've got a framework in place, so nothing really needs to change here in Australia for that. We just need to submit our application, and the regulator needs to work through their processes for the approval. And most of that is around the safety of the product. And so there's a lot of safety data and information that we need to provide around that application. As you mentioned, yes, there's an application in at the moment from a different company that's using a different technology. So there'll be some similarities, but there'll be a lot of things that we do differently as well. So there's not probably a whole lot that we will take out of that as a company. It'll probably be more beneficial to the regulators to go through that process and see what I guess the different processes are that are used, but them going through that process a little before they assess our application, we think will actually be beneficial to us and give the regulator a bit more comfort around cultivated meat in general, and what they need to be looking for and be aware of, and the questions that they want to ask, and obviously then what they need us to supply for them. So I think that might work a little bit in reverse, and I think that's probably the same in most regions and most geographies for the regulators there. Once they've been through the process, a couple of times, I think that'll give them more comfort in assessing the process, and will provide those companies that are coming in behind those companies that have gone through initially, maybe a little bit of an advantage in terms of it being a little bit clearer for what they need to provide, and how they go through that process.
I seem to remember that Vox are doing quail meat, so it's not really similar to what you're doing. But would you be launching in any other countries, or in tandem? Do you think? Have you looked at that?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll do dual applications at the same time. We might, but we'll probably more likely to do them in short succession. So we'll definitely focus on Australia first. We've obviously got our facility here. The whole team is here. We'll get our process and our product regulated here first, and then look at other jurisdictions, because there's obviously a couple of ways you could go, and that would be exporting the product from your home country to another country that you have approval in, or you could set up the facility in the country that you're looking to get approval of your product in. And so I think we'll probably do that in succession. Outside of Australia, obviously the US is a huge market, and also quite advanced in terms of the regulatory framework. Asia, China, geographically for us is close by as well. And then obviously everyone talks about Singapore, where the first product was regulated. But for our lamb product, we're also looking at the Middle East, and we know there's a number of companies, particularly in Israel, working in the cultivated meat space, and we believe they're fairly well along in terms of the regulatory framework there as well. So they're probably the regions we'd look to next, shortly after establishing the process here in Australia.
Yeah. So do you have any predictions about which country might be next in giving approval, as you're an insider?
I don't know if I'm an insider, definitely in the industry, but look, it's hard to know in terms of countries. I think we're probably more likely to see some additional approvals in the US or potentially Singapore next. There's been a lot of talk, as I mentioned, around the Middle East, and they obviously have a number of food safety and security issues that they're very aware of there as well, and so I think they're quite advanced. China is a little bit more opaque in terms of where they're at, but we know that a lot of countries they take their lead from the FDA and USDA, and so I think the approvals in the US will speed up the process, I guess, in those other jurisdictions. And look, we know that the EU is a little bit further behind, I guess, those other regions, and I think we could probably say that with a bit of certainty that that won't be happening anytime soon. It's more likely to be the Middle East and China, or potentially more. I think most likely more approvals in the US, but hopefully Australia is not too far behind as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was tipped Australia as being one of the next places by one of my guests, so we'll see. So, what do you think are some of the major? So, I mean, you said that you expect to be commercial in just over a year. Then if you're putting in for approval at the end of this year, then a year later, you expect to be at the end of 2024, start of 2025. So what are some of the major hurdles to that? Obviously, kind of regulatory approval and kind of changing mindsets and kind of getting the right formula and all of those things. Is there anything else that you see as perhaps being a hurdle?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned the two obvious ones are around product development. We've got to make sure that the product tastes good, it has a great health or nutritional profile, and that consumers want to eat it. So that's the first box that we need to tick. We need to tick a product that's in demand. That's the first one. Obviously, regulatory approval is a major one, because without regulatory approval, we can't sell any of our products. And so, again, we're very comfortable, with that process and what it looks like. But that's another tick box that we need to get through. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, there's going to be a large education or consumer awareness piece around cultivated meat, the technology behind it, the process of it, and the benefits to it as well, to bring the consumers along, on the journey of developing cultivated meat products and getting them more familiar with it, comfortable with it, and looking to purchase. I think they're the three main areas. Obviously, we're very comfortable with the technology, with the scalability of the technology. There is some capital investment required in terms of infrastructure and facilities, manufacturing, distribution, and those sorts of things, as there would be with any new food product that was coming to market. But yeah, I think the three main ones, are the ones we mentioned.
Do you think there's going to be much sort of kickback against the meaty industry, against the animal agriculture in Australia and around the world? So obviously, trying to educate people when there is there are industries kind of pushing in the opposite direction. Is that going to be a problem, do you think?
I certainly think
Rupert Murdoch, coming, it's kind of blighting the world with kind of misinformation. Is that something that the Australians are awake to, or is it going to be a problem?
I think, as with any large incumbent industry, it's fairly normal to be threatened by a new entrant or a new technology or a new way of doing things that could impact your business or your industry. And I don't think animal agriculture is any different. And so from the conversations that we've had with incumbents in the industry, they've been very different, and they've probably changed over time. So if we're talking 3 or 4 years ago, most people still thought this was never going to happen. Cultivated meat was not an industry. These products would never come to fruition. But I think we've moved well past that, where everyone can see now that the technology is already there. The products are being created. They're going to be widespread on the market in the short to medium term. And so I think that's changed the perception, particularly, well, in general, but particularly, with the existing industry, if we think about traditional animal agriculture. And now I think there's two approaches. There's those who see it as a threat and, might say or do things to, discredit or downplay the technology or the products that we're using. And then there's others who see it as an opportunity and have engaged with us, in conversations around, okay, well, is there a way we can adopt this in our business? Can we incorporate this technology and what you're doing in our business and in our way of doing things? Because as we've quite clearly demonstrated, there's a lot of benefits to cultivated meat around sustainability and resource use, but also on price point as well. And so these companies that are operating traditional animal agriculture businesses are really in it as a profit generating entity, and so they're interested in the commercials. And if they can produce the same product for the consumer with a much larger margin, then of course they should be interested in that technology and being able to utilize it. And so I think the ones that are open to it and are open to adopting the technology, incorporating the technology, or looking at partnering with companies that are doing that or doing that in-house themselves or exploring those opportunities, I think are going to be, you know, the best place moving forward. And there's going to be others, obviously, that just, you know, want to put the barriers up and do everything they can to, you know, stop that technology being adopted or the cultivated meat industry flourishing. So there's going to be both sides of the fence. But as we've seen with other technologies and technology in general, technology never goes backward. Never in the history of time has technology gone backwards. So it's coming, and we'll just see how the incumbents adopt to that.
Yeah, I mean, it rarely goes back, or as you say, it never goes backwards, but it can be severely slowed down, I suppose, can't it? And you as a vegan, you will understand that there is you know, I mean, a member of my family, he told me about a month ago that he had read somewhere on Facebook that kind of veganism is bad for the planet. So it's, you know, there is going to be some unusual news out there, but it is a very exciting industry, and I'm very excited about it for all of the reasons you've mentioned. So I wish you the best of luck with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. We've certainly got a number of challenges ahead, but I guess within the industry, we're all very excited about where we've come in the previous, you know, 10 years, speaking as an industry, 3 years, you know, as a company, and really looking forward to bringing as many cultivated meat products to market, you know, across the globe.
Yes. Well, I look forward to tasting some. I still haven't yet, but I'm excited to do that. And thank you for coming on and talking to me and us, Paul. And you can sign off now.
No worries, Alex. Thanks so much, and you're welcome to come down to Australia anytime you like. We'll happily bring you in for tasting.
I'd love to do that. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.